Yes, I've actually undertaken a project that is much bigger than myself. It is definitely worth doing, but whether I did it right or not, I tried, and I hope that what is there now lives up to the grandeur and the splendor and the meaning and the symbolism of the ancient city. I have to say something, first of all, about Watkins, because I'm really honored and privileged to be here. Never thought that one day I would be sitting in Watkins and talking about my book, which is being sold here. That was over 30 years ago. I was working in England for years as a psychiatrist, and I was drawn to it. Somehow it's all destiny. I like the area because of course it is the theater island and I love theater, and I pumped into this bookshop and found Thoth or Jehuti on the carpet, and since then I became addicted to Watkins, and I bought several books from them, and I really loved them and loved this area. How it all began, my story with New Hermopolis, and how it became New Hermopolis. When I was young, when I was a child, there was a commercial on TV set in, it was animated film, but it was a commercial. And it's set to music and set to certain lyrics, and the words were really beautiful. And it talks about a prince, a young man who, ordinary young man, who fell in love with a princess. And this princess was living in huge castle somewhere, and and it was almost impossible to win her heart, let alone to marry her. And according to this little story, that he has to look for something that is hidden in the last bit of the land of Egypt, and he will endure all sorts of difficulties, and he has to overcome obstacles and all that sort of thing in order to get that tiny treasure for her. Of course, everyone was, when we were young, the girls were identified with Ghada, not Hamada, who is actually the ordinary man, and Ghada was the princess, that she is putting her conditions about how, whether she will accept this man or not, depending on his quest and depending on his finding this treasure. Of course, I wanted to be the boy. I didn't want to be Ghada at all. Until now, I don't want to be any Ghadas, yes. So what happened is that he went through his quest and found this little treasure, which was hidden in the bottom of the earth, and it is so it's a long story. Anyway, this little treasure, because it is a commercial, was a tiny bottle of perfume in Egypt, which unfortunately is not being made now. It's called Kismat, and Kismat means destiny. So, and this perfume was very, very popular. It was really, on Mother's Day, all of us as kids used to bring it to our mothers as a gift. So it was telling me something. Of course, I didn't really. What is this thing about this commercial, and about the destiny, and about this treasure that is hidden somewhere in the land of Egypt, and you will never be able to find it without enduring all sorts of hazards. I didn't know then about the Book of Thoth. But then I learned about the Book of Thoth, which is the legendary book. There is a true Book of Thoth, and there is a legendary one, and the legendary one is supposed to have been the reason for the essence of the ancient Egyptian civilization, because it captured its science and it captured everything this civilization was all about. And it is about learning, it's about the pursuit of learning that never ends, about the quest to find wisdom. And it was supposed to have been lost, and no one has found it. But there is a historical book of thought that has been salvaged and actually translated. It's fragments of papyri, and it's attributed to Thoth, of course, this guy, as well as many other manuscripts that we're going to talk about in a second. The area where all these things are supposed to have been derived, the factory that made all these ideas, be it the Book of Thought or the Hermetica, which is the Hermetic manuscripts, or the Emerald Tablet, all of these are attributed to Thoth. So I had to actually, like the Hamada, to search for the city of Thoth. And the city of Thoth has changed its name to Hermes, so it became the polis of Hermes. Hermes is the Greek equivalent of Thoth, and the Greeks, when they came in after Alexander the Great, okay, there were Greeks prior to Alexander, but the Greeks, who came with Alexander the Great, actually chose this area, liked this area. Why? Because Alexander the Great, his main dream was to unite for the first time East and West and create a huge civilization and have Egypt, which after that became Alexandria, its capital. And he didn't know how to go about it, because he came into Egypt like everywhere else to fight the Persians and get rid of the Persians. And the Persians were in that part of Egypt more than anywhere else. And in that part of Egypt as well, there were all sorts of races and all sorts of creeds. There were Arabs coming from the peninsula, the Arab peninsula, prior to the Arab entry into Egypt, the Muslim entry into Egypt. Now that was a long time ago, because it was the land of opportunities. It was a prosperous land, and anyone wanted to be there. There were Greek philosophers and Greek students who came in to learn from Egypt, and we know that there was Plato and there was Pythagoras, and there were all these people who were actually there before Alexander the Great. And there were Syrians, and there were all sorts of people, and they seemed to be living harmoniously together. So Alexander couldn't get over this fact, because he comes from a land that is full of islands and states, and the state is my country, and anything else are barbarians. I mean, the Egyptians never really thought of themselves. They thought the whole of the world is Egypt, because they had this idea of a cosmos, and Egypt was the mirror of heaven on earth. So anywhere in the world was Egypt. So anyone who comes, he's Egyptian. And so, until now, there is this kind of tendency among the Egyptians, not so much with all the difficulties we've been having over recent years, but this is the spirit of Egypt, that Egypt embraces everybody. All nationalities and all ideas are variants or different expressions of the same thing. Even God is multiple and one. He is one who sums up the multitude. So the multiple is one and the one is multiple. And this is actually the ideas behind the Hermetic city. So when Alexander came in, he realized that in order to reconcile all the Greek that came into Egypt and make them understand that this is a new home and this is a kind of universal home. Because they didn't know. I mean, they had very much an identity crisis like what we have these days with the globalization we're having. But I argued that the first globalization, we are into the second globalization. The first globalization was at the time of Alexander the Great. And in order to reconcile humanity and find the way out of who I am and who the other and how to relate to the other and how to relate to the world, he had actually to find something universal, something unifying, something humanistic. So there was this fusion between the Greek and the Egyptian mind, and the Hellenistic mind was born. And that gave ways for people to identify with an idea. So the idea became home, became a way of life, and philosophy became a life-solving tactic. It was actually because there was nothing, and we do now. I mean, I actually think that humanistic psychology all comes from the ancient wisdom tradition, and particularly Egypt, and you will see that in the book. I mean, there is a chapter in my book which is about Hermeticism as a philosophy of hope, because we are in a crisis. Humanity everywhere is in a crisis, be it a crisis of identity, be it a polarization, who is good, who is bad. Look at what is going on in the Ukraine war. Look at everywhere is bad. We are into crisis with the weather, with the global warming, so we lost touch with something that actually gave answers to the human situation and the human predicament. And these ideas that came from ancient Hermopolis, which was the Ogdoad and the Ashmonin, the city of eight. Ogdoad is actually this, in ancient Egypt, the city itself was called the city of eight, or Ogdoad. The Ogdoad is 4 and 4, 4 masculine primordial forces and 4 feminine primordial forces. To make it simpler, although the ancient Egyptians had more into the depths of these 4 elements, we talk about water, we talk about air, and we talk about fire and earth. For the Egyptians, if I ask anyone, is water feminine or masculine? Maybe for some people, according to their mother tongue, it is feminine. For others, it is masculine. The Egyptians had masculine and feminine for everything. So the 4 primordial forces, the masculine and the 4 feminine, they married each other, and harmony and balance and proportion was born. So this is ancient Hermopolis. Which is the city of 8, is where harmony was born, and where balance was born, where proportion was born, and the concept of that you have to marry the opposing forces, or the idea of integration. We are looking now into a way of integrating different elements in the world, not dismissing things. No, finding that even within the bad there is an element that can be integrated into the good. And the idea of ancient Egyptian balance or justice is that you don't go after the bad and kill the bad, because there will be another bad coming after that, because you can never get rid of that. There are 2 sides of the same coin. And in order to go on and evolve and ascend on the ladder of humanity, you have to accept that this is a phase of life. This is an aspect of life. You balance it off. You increase the dose of goodness and beauty. And by doing that, you are actually conquering evil. But if you start saying that I have an ultimate ownership over wisdom, I know it all, you are going to get into things like, be it communism, being fundamentalism, be it even scientific reductionism, that all is rubbish and we have all the answers. So this kind of monopoly of wisdom that we created over the years have actually put humanity at a very dire situation. So when Alexander the Great found that, he actually thought, oh, well, there is a universal city. There is a city, there is a cosmic city. There is this idea that we are all the same. And we can only live by integrating several aspects and balancing things off and creating a new world which is really coming out of all the fragments, of all the aspects of humanity. So that was behind, it was the model behind the big cosmopolis that became Alexandria after that. So Hermopolis in Upper Egypt, it's not Upper Egypt actually, it is Middle Egypt. Hermopolis, or the city of Ogdawad, or Ashmunin, in Middle Egypt, exactly. It is 320 kilometers from Cairo, and 320 kilometers from Luxor, and 320 kilometers from the Hurghada in Red Sea, and 320 kilometers from the oasis, Dakhla and Kharka. So it is the heart of Egypt, and I don't really think that that was haphazard location. I think it was a chosen for the symbolism of this city and its importance. So we are talking about something that people do not realize. People look at this shop full of books and full of writers who spend their life talking about spiritual sciences now, which is in vogue, and because people are actually on the look for answers. And the answers that are available in midstream or mainstream are not giving really any real answers. So everyone all over the world is disillusioned by what is available, and they are searching for alternatives. Nobody knows. Some have knowledge of the roots of all these spiritual sciences that are becoming actually so important to many people now. Look at Watkins. He had the image of this in the carpet. So it is the root of everything. Without reviving the ancient seeds of perennial wisdom, of humanity's source of wisdom, you are going to be having bits and pieces from everywhere, and not knowing where the root is. And it is sad, because we have an example from history that in order to build something that can have a lasting potential, you really have to seek harmony. And this city was the seat of harmony. But it was also the city that was the factory or the center that produced a bulk of ideas, be it, as I said, the Book of Thought, the Hermetica that was after that, collected in Alexandria, and then went to Florence and was behind the whole esoteric movement of the whole world. But it was, without it, we wouldn't have had Leonardo da Vinci, we wouldn't have had people that the whole Renaissance came. I mean, you have Ficino was the one who translated the Hermetica from Greek into Latin, and the whole world was open hermetically. But before the translation of the Hermetica, there was the Emerald Tablet, but the Emerald Tablet was more or less the interest of the Arabs, the early Arab Muslim scholars, who were actually very learned group, and many of them settled near Hermopolis in Middle Egypt. There is another city called Panopolis, and Pan, by the way, is Hermes' son. Panopolis is Akhmim, and it is the city of alchemy. So, and from alchemy, so you have all these things are connected. There is something that in my book, I call the Geohermetic Belts. It is very important because also Asyut, which is next door to where Hermopolis is and where I built a new Hermopolis, we have Plotinus, who is behind the new Platonic movement. So you have all of that in one area, and yet Egypt is not looked at as the geography behind these ideas. Without connecting the land with the ideas, we are missing a lot. Because also it is a land that never looked at territories. It transcended its territories because it produced ideas that are good and fit for human consumption everywhere. And the evidence for it that it influenced so many people, because after the Renaissance we have the Italian Renaissance, and then from the Italian Renaissance we have the British Renaissance, and which started with Elizabeth I, and the Golden Age, and we have Dr. Dee, and we have all these things that actually changed and reformed religion, and there was this idea of a utopian world, which again influenced America, and we have in America all the gurus of spirituality early on, besides the fact that it is a new Atlantis or whatever, but things like in literature, you have people like Emerson, you have someone like William James, who's the professor of psychology and was a philosopher, and talked about the varieties of religious experiences and how to reconcile all these things and how to see all of these things as expressions of the one. And it carried on. We have the German Renaissance, which was influenced by the alchemical tradition that the Arabs, when they translated the Emerald Tablet, which was in the 8th century, before Ficino translating the Hermetica, which was in the 15th century. So you have that, the alchemical Emerald Tablet was more into alchemy, was more into medicine, but medicine of the soul as well. So the alchemy was supposed to be that you change the idea of the alchemy, that you change or you transform a cheap metal into precious metal. But the symbolism is that we are born with something probably crude and cheap, and only with knowledge you ascend on the ladder of humanity, and you recreate yourself. You are in constant becoming. There is actually a book here, it's called Becoming Gold, and it is by a friend of mine who is really looking in Zosimus, who was from Panopolis, and his story was alchemy. And so alchemy became, it was transformed into Sufism, or Gnosticism in Islam, which of course was preceded by the Gnosticism in Judaism and the Gnosticism in Christianity. So you have the Kabbalah and you have the Gnostic tradition of all the Gnostic manuscripts, which were full of enlightening things. So the story of Hermopolis, and it's some of ideas that influence the world up until now. Even the lady that wrote her, this Harry Potter, she talked about the fact that she read more alchemy books and more mystical books than anything else. We talk about Freud. Freud said that without ancient Egypt he wouldn't have reached. I mean, we have to remember that he became a psychoanalyst only in his 50s. And it was, he produced a new science, so there is always hope. And as you see, there is a chapter in my book about the Hermeticism as a philosophy of hope. It was, you will see how many philosophers after the Second World War and the First World War as well, that became heavily influenced by these ideas and found that history is a reservoir of ideas, of tactics. Only if we can read them and see them. You don't visit history to mummify history or to put it in a museum. You visit history to learn from it. That there are stories of survival, and the stories of survival is what is going to lead to hope for us. So with this short introduction, which of course I would have loved to have the projector and show you slides and everything, because without the images really I cannot convey properly what I'm talking about. But we have, I had in a way within me every reason to try to revive this ancient city. And I'm not reviving it like I mean, it is a project similar in some ways to the Library of Alexandria and the rebuilding of the new library. It's not as grand as that, but it is supposed to capture the spirit of the ancient city, which emphasizes balance, harmony, and the idea of the constant remaking of man, that man is a creator. He partakes in the act of creation, and creation is not a one-off incident. We are constantly being made. This idea of being and becoming, how they are interlinked, and we have every day. This is a very Egyptian concept, that you become every day because you die every night, and then you become in the morning a new being. And even Khibri, which is the scarab, means in the Egyptian language to become. So becoming within being is what gives hope to humanity. The idea of this new place, which is actually, I got a land, barren land, desert, sand, 10 acres of land, and I had to dig for a well. I had to find my own sources of power, and then divided it into 3 parts. Farm, which is green farming, because green Hermeticism and people like Rudolf Steiner and all of that are all heavily influenced by the Hermetic tradition. So, and then an ecolodge, which is again about architecture and green architecture, and which is supposed to be helping people to see or to come to the source of all this knowledge and revisit this knowledge in the hope that they will put a location to something. They have roots, and that's why I call it is a space for multiple belonging. But it's also space for creativity, because you can keep recreating the world around you, because art is essential in the Hermetic philosophy. The becoming is through recreation or creation, through your creativity. Everyone is a creator. Everyone, the farmer, any worker is a creator. So by triggering the creativity within every individual. You assist the person in his journey to become. And only ends when one is dead. So there is no ending to becoming. And that is the antidote against destruction. People talk about how the world is dreadful now and how things are really bad. I say forget about that, create another discourse. Don't fight the existing one. But I feel that people are thirsty and hungry for this new discourse, but they should be the makers of this discourse by not taking hodgepodge ideas, by actually trying to root the ideas and create something that can have affinity, that can attract the humanity at large and can actually produce answers. The answers will still be individual answers, but it is a tactics, it is a mechanism by which you can answer your or find answers to your own problems, because it is a reservoir of ideas, and it is about survival, and it is about hope. The third part of it is a creative space, an art space, who's supposed to help people, local, national, and international, to actually, again, celebrate art in all forms, including creative industries. So within this building and within this structure, the new Hermopolis exists. But of course you are hit against what is going on with the world, be it COVID-19, be it wars, be it Arab Spring, be it all these things, and then you have no business and you have nobody to come and it's supposed to actually help revive the local community and create sustainability to the many villages around it. Through heritage, by reviving heritage and teaching people, because this is also an area of Egypt that unfortunately is polarized, because it has a huge Christian population and it has Muslim population. Muslim population became fundamentalists. So you have the friction all the time and you have factional strife, and yet it is the seat of harmony, the ancient seat of harmony and reconciliation. So you try to say this is not America telling us about love your neighbor or acceptance of the other and all these things. No, it is rooted in this land, and it was produced here. What is even better than these ideas, which are obviously very grand and very important, is the fact that the pursuit of learning is about everything. Is to have curiosity, is to have desire to learn, to have desire to note, to have a desire to reshape yourself and remold your present and your future. So that's it. Thank you.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the principle of as above, so below, and what does that mean?
It is a very profound concept, but I think to put it simply, it is that man is supposed to be the gardener on earth. I mentioned that Egypt being the mirror of heaven, that whatever goes up has to be applied down. And it is the harmony of the stars and the harmony of the creation that is symbolized by the Almighty God has to actually be represented by his partner in the creation, the human. The human is a gardener, is the one who is supposed to beautify the earth and to make it a better place for everyone. So this is really, in a nutshell, the concept. Yeah. And the same, I mean, it is the beginning, is the first line of the emerald tablet, but also what is inside is outside. Yeah, so it's the truthfulness. You are true to the world. You are true to your mission as human, because we were made with minds. We were made with creative impulses. We were made with potential that is limitless. So if you don't live up to that, you are betraying the secret or the mystery of your creation, and you are betraying your covenant with God in many ways. And being truthful, what is inside is outside, is this integrity. And the integrity comes from integration, and it is all these things, how to balance all the bad things with the good things in you and create a better self all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that Alexander the Great had a vision to unite East and West. Is that still a current vision for the...
He died. Well, I mean, I actually think, because there are also, I mean, if you read about the philosophers, especially the Neoplatonic circles in Alexandria, and also the Stoics, you will see much of the Hermetic things in them. And it is all, I mean, I'm very fond of Seneca, and but also Solon was really very much into this universality. And even Cleopatra, people don't know Cleopatra enough, because Cleopatra was a very learned person, and was really interested in that part of Egypt as well. She brought Caesar with her to that place, and there is a harbor there in Ashmonin called, which really awaits further exploration, called the harbor of Cleopatra. So they say, so she is, and she was a great alchemist. So she's, there are quite a lot that we don't really know, but without revisiting the site and giving weight and importance and emphasis to the land that produced such ideas, it is very much like a brain without a body. I mean, it's almost like that. But of course, it is, you know, regardless of that, our globalization now is not the same idea. Although in many ways, of course, Alexander the Great was not that great humanist, but he had ideas. I mean, we have to remember that Aristotle was his teacher, and he had Homer's under his pillow, and Achilles was his, you know, all these things were really, so he was a very well-educated young man. And his mother instilled in him that he descends from Egypt and from the pharaohs and all blah blah, all these things. But so he had that, and yet I think it was also about expansion and military triumphs, very much like our globalization, which is about new liberalism and about, you know, really the dictatorship of the market and all these things. So unfortunately, it always starts. That's why you don't fight the existing, because the existing has elements in it. You work with it. And you are not sure that by producing a new idea and trying to eradicate the existing, that your new idea is not going to be a new dictatorship. Because you will obviously get rid of anyone who opposes your ideas. This is by definition. So so this is the beauty about this area, and the beauty really about the spiritual sciences. that it is because it encompasses everything, and it helps you to embrace everything, and it's about balance, proportion, and integrity and integration.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the ideas of Hermopolis through the alchemical tradition, or the Gnostic traditions, influenced Carl Jung a lot.
Yes, of course.
You
Of
say-
course, I have a studio in New Hermopolis. All are named after all these people. One of them is Jung. We have Mozart actually, as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
because you know the magic flute, and the magic flute is all about the alchemical transformation through music. So that evil can never tolerate music, can never tolerate beauty, and this is really again the element: increase the dose of beauty, increase the dose of goodness, increase the dose of justice, increase that, because it will buffer. You don't get rid of, but you buffer.
Is it possible to go there? Or?
Of course. Yeah, in fact, I'm begging for people. I'm also begging for someone to take over the business from me, because I created this huge thing and it is devouring me. I feel like Mary Shelley that created Frankenstein. Yeah, exactly, because it is monstrous, because it is a huge business that you have to keep it alive. Otherwise, I would have closed long time ago. So it's yeah. No, that you will be most welcome.
How does one go about to
Visit?
yeah?
Yeah, just get in touch with me, and I'll give you. But we are trying to make a retreat out of it. So it's not individual bookings. It is really a group of people who are going to sense the place and experience it, and also there are antiquities to be visited. So there is a tangible heritage as well as an intangible heritage in the body of ideas, as well as the living of the people, the life of the local people, which is extension to the ancient ones. So, and it is very interesting and very inspirational. The actual living of the people, the architecture, the pottery, I mean, quite a lot of things are very, very inspirational. And they're dying because obviously people realize that modern man doesn't want these things. And they even destroy their own homes, and they destroy their way of life and everything, thinking that they are going to be respected and looked upon favorably, because they look upon themselves and their way of life in a demeaning light, unfortunately. And that's because the dominant culture is urban. So even all these places are heavily urbanized and without proper production. So you turn them into consumers. So even things like bread making and all these things, the bread tradition in Egypt is amazing. We had something like, people say, up to 40 recipes for bread. The only ones that are still in existence are 2. Yeah, and they can die any minute. Luckily enough, we're trying to because they are very good. I mean, one of the bread is called the tau, and it's made of corn mainly. And it is gluten free, and it's really it can be, you know, good for everyone. But they don't see all these things and all this potential, because they don't look upon themselves creatively. So that's and that is really the crux of the matter. We have actually 2 people here who visited the place, so we'll bring them And I'm delighted to have them both because they kept it as a surprise for me, and I only found them here. So I'm very, very deeply touched that they made the effort, and I'm really grateful to all of you for making the effort to come today and hear this talk. Would you like to say something? Amir and Yasmin. Amir and Yasmin. They are two Egyptians. Yes, the oil. The oil, yeah. No, it's not perfume.
No, sorry,
Oil.
sorry.
Yeah, it is, because people take it as perfume. It is because we have a blue lotus pond.
Yeah.
And to try to cultivate it, and we succeeded. But still, it is our pond only, and I tried to produce this oil, and but again, it is very much like the whole thing. I was accepting all the challenges first. I've been at it now for 15 years. So I'm not going to make oil again. It is just I was challenging myself to do all these things. We have also our olive oil. We have that's and Yasmin, when she came in to visit me, she's into perfumes and essential oils and everything, and she introduced someone to me who's helping me with geranium, and there will be geranium throughout the land between the olive groves.
Definitely have to visit
Yeah,
Hermopolis if you
yeah.
can. Read the book first and then
Yes,
it's
yeah.
only like an hour and a half from Cairo.
Really?
2 hours and a half, yes. It's 320 kilometers, so it's not.
What's the best time
And
to
now,
go?
yeah,
So it's south from Cairo.
it's south.
And then-
Everything
and
good
then-
is south.
And then